All right, and we'll be kicking off our afternoon session with a panel that's going to put everything into context for us and find balance between different approaches and explain to us, the strength and weaknesses of different approaches and how they can come together and provide some real solutions, for real world problems. So with that, I will just quickly introduce the moderator of this panel is Roland Scharrer. He's currently the Group Chief Emerging Technology and Data Officer at AXA Insurance. And of course, AXA is a charter partner of our Codex Insurance Initiative. And we've been working together very closely on using computable contracts to improve the insurance experience for all stakeholders in the world of insurance. And Roland's been a real thought leader and a cheerleader for our work here at Stanford. He's an accomplished technologist. He's worked for Capgemini before working at AXA, and he holds a number of different degrees, computer science, and he's a biologist and chemistry, as also an MBA from ESADE. And Roland has kindly agreed to run this session for us. So please join me in welcoming Roland and his panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I was really looking forward to the session, and I promised Roland to talk about everything else besides generative AI. So, before I introduce my panelists, I would like to introduce you to the topic, what it's all about. And I decided to reuse the slide from this morning, okay? The Gartner Hype Cycle from Gartner. Clearly, you see here generative AI. Generative AI, biggest hype ever. I work on this area for quite some time now. It's something that really goes through the roof and unlocks a lot of possibilities in terms of unstructured data and how you're unlocking unstructured data in the legal space, for instance. On the other side, there are additional technologies and additional approaches that have been pushed over the last decades. One prominent one is, of course, knowledge graphs or systems where you use logic rules, and actually do logical reasoning on that one. And it's here as well on the hype cycle. And the hype cycle always has a hype curve and then reaching a plateau over time where rational applications coming out usually and industrial scale comes out. And there's another topic I would like to highlight, and this will be part of our discussion today, is the topic of Neuro-Symbolic AI. So meaning how things are coming together. Because in artificial intelligence, there's almost a religious fight going on. You can call it at least, because there are strong beliefs around that one, between the one side of the people that believe machine learning and now generative AI will conquer all the problems what we have in our society, while on the other side, symbolic AI, math, logical reasoning will be replaced over time by large language models and approaches driving that one. So these discussions, it feels like discussions between what we had in the past as well, Amiga versus Atari, Mac versus Windows, Netscape browser versus Internet Explorer, and now we have symbolic AI versus generative AI. We wanted to have this panel today really as an open discussion between all of us here. This is why please sharpen your pencils, have questions on the topic for us, especially PhD students should actually have a few questions linked to the topic we are driving. And that said, I would like to introduce my panelists with me. On my right side, Damien Riehl, lawyer by training, technologist by heart, if you can say it like this.
That's good.
VP of VLEX, who've achieved with knowledge graph technology a huge success and a huge transformation. Will tell us more about that one. Then Bart Verheij, professor of artificial intelligence from the University of Groningen, a long-lasting fellow of Codex, especially tackling the topic of AI in law and how to drive them forward. And on far out on the right side, colleague of mine, Ran Lin, working as a global head of data science and applied AI for AXA Commercial Insurances here in the US, so AXA XL Insurance. Before that one at Chubb, and before that one as well at AIG, so widespread applied understanding of doing actually AI in the legal space and driving them on forward. And she will tell us a little bit more about the topics she overcome and have seen in the industry to drive them forward. So to open this discussion, so I would like to start with you, Bart, as a first topic. Seeing this morning the success of generative AI, large language models, going through the roof, and with all your history and other things you have seen, is that one now the final end game? And will there be one model to rule them all? Or is it just a hype like any other one we had in the past?
The final game? Well, I always say that artificial intelligence is still not good enough, because I only want the real thing. I only want the AI that does it right when it can be right. And that is because I started as a mathematician, so I was a math student long ago, so only perfection is what counts. And if I look back at the history of artificial intelligence, there is only one technology, an old-fashioned technology, that actually comes to that standard, and that is the old-fashioned symbolic artificial intelligence. We will discuss knowledge graphs, symbolic AI. That's the only kind of AI that I know of, and of course you can challenge me and us, that actually meets this standard of perfection that is sometimes achievable. Of course, that technology also has downsides, because it is not so good for learning, it is not so good for scalability. And that is, let's say, the second phase of the history of artificial intelligence that is very important. And that came actually after my PhD, machine learning. So machine learning became very important after my PhD, so I was, in a sense, already then at the start of my career out of the game. Because machine learning definitely contributed a lot to artificial intelligence. But unfortunately, not to my standards, because perfection is not a part of the machine learning game, right? So just percentages, when you have 80% performance, sometimes that can be a big result. Well, not good enough if people can do it 100%, if correct, if they would have the time for achieving that. So that is the second phase, and now we are in this phase of large language models. And what I always say is, for me it is spectacular also, but for a different reason, I guess, than for several of us here. Maybe some of you are a bit scared or by the possibilities that you might lose a job or something like that. For me, the reason why I'm really fascinated by these times is that finally something that comes from data-driven artificial intelligence is relevant again for the problems that I'm interested in, namely reasoning and knowledge representation. So these large language models show some signs every now and then under controlled circumstances that they can reason, and that they sometimes also seem to understand, well, that's maybe a big word for philosophers, our world to an extent. But, well, again, I'm sorry to say, not good enough. So many billions are thrown at it, and also a lot of talent is thrown at it. But, well, I am looking forward to actually the real end game, when I can have a good conversation with an AI that actually listens. Because that was one of the speakers, that was, I think, Dan Ho this morning, who said that in one of the cases that he discussed, that the puzzle of due process is actually that you want someone to listen. Well, I don't know what happens when you have a conversation with one of the LLMs. It does not yet really listen like what lawyers do all the time. That's their goal. That's my first shot.
Thank you. Damien, going to you. You invested 25 years of your life in building knowledge graphs, driving them on forward, and you give us a glimpse of what you are currently doing. Was that one now a waste of time?
I think the answer is no. Dating me perhaps with my 25 years is some people might remember the commercial where a woman was walking with chocolate and a guy was walking with peanut butter, and then all of a sudden they go together and it's like, oh, you put your chocolate in my peanut butter, and you put my peanut butter in my chocolate, and then of course the Reese's peanut butter cup came out of that. And then the catchphrase is, these are two great tastes that taste great together. And I think that's the way that symbolic AI and connectionist AI, that is neural nets, I think they are two great tastes that taste great together. And I would say that I've spent my day jobs with Sally. Sally is a legal data standard. We're applying for ISO number, so we will soon have an ISO number. We're being used by tiny companies like Thomson Reuters, by LexisNexis, by Bloomberg Law, by my company VLex, iManage, NetDocuments, some in-house at Microsoft, DLA Piper, Gibson Dunn, some of the biggest law firms in the world, some of the biggest legal tech vendors of the world, and the biggest in-house corporations of the world are all coalescing around this legal data standard that is a knowledge graph. Motion to dismiss for breach of contract in the Southern District of New York. Each of those is a tag that has a unique identifier that now Thomson Reuters and everyone can be able to interoperate with that unique identifier. Merger agreement, force majeure clause. Each of those is a tag that you can be able to tag up and make interoperable. So I think that the answer to your question, the short answer is no, because I think that once you have this 17,000 tags that we currently have as of last night, 17,128 tags, I think to be accurate, we have 17,000 things that matter to the law, everything that matters to the business of law and the substance of law. And now we're coalescing as an industry to be able to have large language models reason with that now symbolic AI. The things that we're doing are what matter type is it? What document type is it? Is there a force majeure clause? What is the time entry? These are all things that you see on your screen that we're tagging up and make interoperable.
But to challenge you a little bit on that one, so I like the pitch, what you're doing there. If I would build a large language model, a smaller one, with the same kind of data, would it have the same kind of output?
I think no. We are a truly global standard. That is, we have an Indian working group, a Latin American working group, a European working group. The Indian working group came up to us and said, Damien, you're missing the concept of strict liability. I said, no, here, look, it's strict liability, it's right here. They said, no, we're not talking about strict product liability. What we're talking about is when one car gets in an accident with a second car, you don't have to decide who's at fault. The insurance company just pays. I said, oh, we call that no-fault claim. So a large language model wouldn't be able to pick up that that is a strict liability in India is a no-fault claim in the United States and in other countries. So I think that you need now in Sally, there is a synonym for no-fault claim that is strict liability if in India. So this kind of strict knowledge representation is something that a large language model might kind of sort of get with vector embedding space, but will never truly get with a high percentage of precision and recall.
Coming to that point, Ron, you have made your experiences as well with generative AI, implementing that one across a company. You made your experiences with knowledge graphs. What is your take on that topic?
In the first panel this morning, there was a very interesting comments about now every company is building hundreds of different chatbots. So my company, we also are finding it interesting, like very easy to experiment on Gen AI with a lot of the new technology offering. And we're building also chatbots. And we find it out like if we already have some experience or some knowledge readily available, it's actually very easy and quickly we can build one. One example is that every company have HR handbook. Our company with the global footprint have even more different languages, different countries' version of HR handbook. Building an HR handbook chatbot is very helpful and enhance our employee experience by allowing employees to ask questions and very quickly look up for the answer. Even like language is no longer a barrier. We found that's very convenient. But when it comes to some areas that actually need very in-depth knowledge and also needed subject matter experts, for example, the areas that I'm focusing on, it's actually been 14 years I've been focusing on leveraging AI and data to boost the efficiency, also profitability for the commercial property and casualty insurance sector, which is highly, highly regulated, so also notably conservative. And we have many, many knowledge that is in silo that in one way is making sure the company have the comparative advantage on the market. But in another way, it's extremely difficult to collect those knowledge. That also means if we're just using a generic Gen AI solution, it would not go deep. It would not have the knowledge to identify, for example, which risk is more risky than others, or whether some change in the wording is causing like higher financial impacts than others. One example that I shared with Roland previously is that in our general aviation insurance, which is covering the crew as well as the aircraft, one time our claims adjuster reviewed the wording and find out that in one claim, it says that these policy will cover the purchase of a new aircraft to replace the damaged one, and it will also repair the aircraft. You'll be like, wait a second, why we pay twice? So when you look deeper, it's actually changing the or to the end. Original wording should be, we will purchase a new aircraft to replace the existing damaged aircraft, or we will repair the current one, right? So by changing just only one word, it completely changed the risk portfolio to the company and double the risk exposure to insurance. It also means a really, really big financial impact by just changing one word. But if we just simply use a regular model, a off-the-shelf Gen AI model, it possibly will tell you that, oh, among these two contracts, they look very similar, 99% the same. So it would not identify this one word change. So on this part, we do need the symbolic model to support, to identify those areas that with a higher financial impact, like which will like drive to a really bad consequence. So it might not, come back to my experience, it's combining these two, marriage these two technologies together will be the way to go. Yeah. Back to you.
When it comes, okay, knowledge graph combining with Gen AI to actually have a better outcome. Everybody who has made experiences with knowledge graph knows there's a big effort to build them. And Damien, I think you can speak for that one with your experience. Is it still worth the effort, and how big is the effort to build these knowledge graphs compared to, okay, let's build an LLM RAG approach to actually get your information in or build a proper embedding?
Yes, it's worth it, because knowledge graphs gives you at least two things that a generative AI would not. Number one is interoperability. All the logos that I showed there earlier, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, and us, and Microsoft and others, if I were to use a large language model and say, I'm going to ship information from LexisNexis to law firm to Microsoft, how would you do that with a large language model? Because all three of them have different models. Another option is to symbolically tag up all the motions to dismiss for breach of contract in the Southern District of New York, which is now interoperable in a knowledge graph. And then also merger agreements with force majeure clauses. Now we can have that interoperability because we have a Sally API where you can now push and pull that data to and from. So that's number one, interoperability. Number two is analytics. If you ask a large language model, what are the percentage of motions to dismiss that Judge Smith has granted? It's going to hallucinate. But if you tag it up with a knowledge graph, you'll be able to get a good number with that. So two of these, it's still worth tagging it up because interoperability and analytics.
Would you see then, in your case, no application area for Gen AI?
No, then use Gen AI on top of that. You can imagine one method of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, is through vector embedding searches and doing that. That's pretty good. Another method is using a large language model, or I'm sorry, using knowledge graphs. Motion to dismiss, breach of contract for Southern District of New York. Do you need vector embedding for that? No, you can collect all that with RAG, with this knowledge graph.
Knowledge graph approach around driving them forward. When you see the rising, Bart, in your direction, see a rising GPT-5 and seeing the possibilities there, do you believe over time there will be as well a possibility to have justification, explainability in such a way that it can stand in front of court? Or, Damien, maybe also a question to you as a former lawyer, or would you say whatever it takes and whatever level of accuracy we're achieving here, we will have still issues in their argumentations?
Yeah, so we are working on that, right? So this is the key puzzle for all technologies today. So the machine learning approaches are pure black boxes. And what we are investigating with our PhD students, they are here in the room. Also, if you were there at the computable contracts workshop, you saw their pitches. We see that the actual rules that are being used by lawyers cannot themselves be recovered from the data alone. So somehow you need to add information to the pure data. If you only have the examples, then you will find all kinds of relations, all kinds of rules possibly, sometimes called spurious correlations, that are there, but they are not the right ones. Because, well, we have constructed our world in a certain way. So lawyers have been working very hard on constructing the fabric of society. I don't know whether you know that is what you have been doing if you are a lawyer. You are really creating a world and you're trying to make it, let's say, as good as possible for us in a society. And that is there for a reason. So just giving the examples is not good enough for recovering that structure. And also, if you think of what we need for the future, that is also why we even have law schools, right? So thinking about the next phase of how to organize society in a better way, that is very hard work. We have law schools for that. It's a profession also to think about the current state of law and develop that in the right direction. So over lunch, I had a nice conversation with the Dutch crowd. Also, Floris Becks, who will be speaking here later today, is there. And we said, yeah, we even today liked the copyright discussion. Because, well, somehow now it becomes relevant to also for us to think about copyright like what lawyers do, right? Because at essence, the discussion was about how do we like our society to be with regards to copyright, right? We like creativity, we like to support that. Right now, just giving examples to large language models or whatever machine learning technology you like, it will not come up with a new solution that we really will be happy with, that needs the care of many human stakeholders, a big discussion. And we are working on new technologies for that, but there is some work to do. So if I think of my PhD students, they have some time, some have not so much time anymore for their PhD degree. They will not solve it within, let's say, their 4 years of time. And even the 100 billions that are sent to these tasks by the big companies in the United States and perhaps elsewhere in the world, they are not yet ready because we need to think of the technology underlying.
And to the topic of explainability, there's, really if the end results are good enough, maybe explainability doesn't matter very much, but we as lawyers are skeptical species. That is, we don't trust the black box in ways that maybe others trust the black box. And when sometimes the results are good enough, that is, a friend of mine's a nurse anesthetist, and she blew my mind about a year ago when said, do you realize that we don't know how anesthesia works? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, we could either, as I believe, like we're asleep and we don't feel a thing. That's option one. Or we feel every single scalpel cut and maybe the anesthesia just makes us forget. We don't know which one of these it is. That freaks me out. I don't know if it freaks you out. But really, if it works, which it does, maybe how it works doesn't matter. So in the same way, maybe if the large language models work and if it looks, my friend Daza, who's in the audience here, he introduced me to the duck test. If it looks like a duck, if it quacks like reasoning, maybe it doesn't matter, right? But we as lawyers are skeptical species. So maybe a knowledge graph atop a large language model, maybe we'll give that explainability to that skeptical lawyer. To be able to say, no, look, here is lawyer drafted motion to dismiss. Look at the nodes and look at the edge between the nodes. The nouns, lawyer, motion to dismiss, and the edge drafted. You can explain how this thing works. And then lawyers will be like, you've now shown me the evidence. Now that's good.
Ron, going to your side. Lawyers, skeptical, clear. But these are not the only ones who are actually working with legal terms, unfortunately. Ron, when would you say, based on your experience with your counterparts in businesses working together, good is good enough and I would just use a large language model? Or when would you say, okay, that stake is too high and we actually have to implement a more stable approach?
So I think part of the reason why there's no one-fits-all solution, if I put it that way, is also because the data, the readiness, right? What if you already have the reasoning? What if you already know what each of your nodes, what will be the edge for it, I mean, coming to your knowledge graph, or if we have enough information that is statistically significant in the statistical way in our large language model training, that it already have the reasoning, right? There could be a solution that actually go to the end of what we ultimate goal should be. But most of the time, the data is not there, not ready. So then we only can base on each individual use cases to judge which solution will be the best suit by use cases. Yeah.
Hearing now the last 20 minutes, yes, knowledge graphs are good, knowledge graphs should be done. Why is not everybody doing it then? What do you believe is the reason why there's still the big hype around Gen AI, very big hype around Gen AI, and knowledge graphs have been seen rather in the shadow of these approaches? What is the reason why we're driving them forward?
I think a large language model is an easy button. It's magical. It just gives you the answer. Knowledge graphs are hard because you have to be able to say what are all the things that matter. So between hard and easy, we as people just tend to go to easy.
Bart?
Also, we should not forget that, let's say, that kind of hard, old-fashioned technology, knowledge graphs, rule-based systems, they are done more often than you think. So the story that I at some point learned was that it is not considered artificial intelligence anymore. So I work in an institute where mathematicians, computer scientists, and AI researchers collaborate. And well, computer scientists, I don't know how it is here, they also have thoughts about artificial intelligence, right? It is not serious computer science. So, but knowledge graphs, rule-based systems, they are considered to be just a technology that you can use for serious tasks. And well, that is something to consider. Whereas AI is fascinating. It is for dreamers. It is also for hypes. And for, let's say, the crazy dreams about the times when there will be no jobs anymore, etc. So computer scientists, in my circles, they don't like that so much. They want serious, reliable tools. There are a lot of them. People use it.
If I could add, I do feel that one of the reasons is because training it needs a lot of investment from the subject matter experts' time. And a lot of time, in many cases, what we see is that it never been able to fully complete it. And many companies, they try to take the approach of, if I haven't completed the whole thing, I don't have the full picture of it, I just don't roll it out. And then you will find out that you'll never be able to have 100% like knowledge and information in the knowledge graph. So a more of an adaptive approach and accept the fact that the AI or the symbolic AI is only going to be a facilitator. Like even if at the beginning only help you on 20%, 30%, just as far as we manage the end user's expectation and continue encouraging people to input their knowledge on it and allowing them to at least release 20-30% of their time to focus on more high value added work. So then that will be a more of a practical approach that I see of.
Would your counterparts, your stakeholders, your business stakeholders, your underwriters be concerned by the black box approach of a Gen AI solution like Damien described for the lawyers? Or is it something what you say manageable?
It actually is a very good question. Time to time, you find them at two extremes. Either they don't trust it at all because they had like failure experience previously, someone promised a breakthrough and actually never happened, or they feel overly enthusiastic about it and think that that is definitely the next generation of AI. It's definitely promising a huge future. I think it's very, very important to bring everyone to the right level of expectation. This is what you're going to get. If you want 100%, then you got to have everything like rule out everything on the spot. But if you want to just have something to help, to facilitate, to reduce the time, then that is possibly 80% is already good enough.
In that regard, one comment from my side. The topic on repeatability or robustness is the next generation of the large language model giving you the same answer like the previous version is an issue by itself. If you have two large language models, two versions of the same one, two fine-tunings of the same model, you're actually getting you get in troubles when it comes to repeatability of the answers and auditability of the answers to drive them further. So there is a rise of neuro-symbolic thinking. But from your side, these approaches combining now AI and symbolic computing, is it something that you see currently in the academic society kicking off? Are there thought leaders in that space? Is it something that really grows with on a common understanding?
Definitely. So the young generation only wants to do hybrid approaches, mixing different styles and also different perspectives. So some of the thought leaders are, of course, the PhD students here in the room, right? So they are really thinking very hard about how to combine statistical approaches that are good for data crunching in the correct way, aligned with logical approaches that are good for actually writing down constraints that you would like a system to adhere to. But it is not so easy. At the same time, they also study mechanisms to make sure that your neural network trained model actually follows the right kind of rules, perhaps by giving it a little bit of the information of an expert that understands the part of law that is there. And also there is a project on using existing examples to actually predict possible conclusions for new cases while adhering to what is already there. So a lot is happening. So we are part, in the Netherlands there is a project that's called Hybrid Intelligence, and the idea is that if you combine machine intelligence with human intelligence, perhaps under certain circumstances you can more than either of them can do alone. But it's hard work, and we especially focus on this idea of hybrid law. Because, well, it is true, I believe that there is still a huge future ahead of us for doing things with machines that are actually beneficial also from the legal perspective. And well, several of you are trying to make money out of that and also to do the right thing, access to justice, things like that. But it is not so easy, I think. Well, just some thoughts. Yeah.
I have some additional thoughts. So you can imagine, let's do a thought experiment where the four of us on the stage here, we all have our own data sets and we're all running our own unique large language models. You're running Gemini, I'm running GPT-4, you're running Mixtral, you're running Llama 2, maybe 3, pretty soon. So now we've all collected our data sets that are contracts. So now you've labeled up all your contracts, but your embedding is different than my embedding, which is different than your embedding. How are we going to say what is market for a merger agreement in the banking industry?
Between us.
Between us, mm-hmm. Right? All of our embeddings are different, right? Wouldn't it be great if we had a universal data standard that merger agreements and force majeure clause in the banking industry were all standardized, that we could then put our embeddings and say, yes, this is it. And now we can collect all of our force majeure clauses, and instead of you and me arguing as to what's market for force majeure clauses for merger agreements in banking, instead of arguing about it, let the data speak. Let's collect and run, okay, this embedding, this meaning of force majeure, this is the most populous in our data set. Let's stop arguing about what's market, because now we know from a data focus what is market. That's not possible through embedding models.
So would you consider that now the large language model providers are buying knowledge graph companies? Or?
Well, if it's free and open source, they're not going to buy anything.
Yes, so I have a question to you, Damien, actually, that is nice. So, because you seem to believe so much in standardization, But I'm not sure whether the lawyers in the room, and you are one of them, actually really believe you, right? Because they always like to make the difference.
Yeah, that's very true.
So there's a lot of pushback to Sally from people that think like that, and they fear that by standardizing, we will essentially commoditize the law. That is, the buy side, the clients, will be able to then compare apples to apples as far as law firm 1 versus law firm 2 versus law firm 3, and we will be in a race to the bottom. I think the exact opposite. I think the proof will be in the pudding of our good work product. Look at my achievements. So we won't stand on obfuscation as we currently do, but there will be light of day to be able to say who is the most high-performing law firm or low-performing, and we won't be standing on obfuscation on the law firm side, and on the vendor side, we won't be standing on proprietary taxonomies. Large legal tech companies, whose names I'm not going to say, you can imagine, have essentially built a moat with their taxonomy. Sally is not a moat. It is free and open source, and it is being used by Thomson Reuters, and LexisNexis, and Bloomberg, and VLex, and Microsoft, and all the biggest law firms in the world. It's all free and open source, no moat available. So anyway, so I think that this is probably the future, to be able to compare apples to apples on the vendor side, apples to apples on the law firm side, and let clients on the buy side be able to figure both of those out.
Thank you. Before we open up to the larger audience to also asking questions, when I drove from San Francisco airport to Stanford, I saw billboards calling rack. My rack is bigger than yours. having rack approach there. So LLM rack, really the hype topic currently. And when I saw the last few days, I think this is the word that's mostly used. How long will it take till we have LLM knowledge graph on billboards from the airport? How long will it take to actually kick that one off, to actually that the broader audience will understand that there's more than just large Gen AI?
What's Neo4j's advertising budget, I guess, is the question.
How long will it take? Bart, what do you believe?
Yeah, so I think I have a very different idea. So it is already everywhere, right? So, what I do believe is that that actually AI will become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, but also better and better. So the LLMs, that's now where the investing goes, will change. So I still believe that actually also single persons who really look at the technology of today will be able to find ideas inside what is happening in LLMs that can be done better. So you don't only have to spend $100 billion or something like that to get your data warehouses filled and blah, 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 and steal or lend or license the data that you are harvesting from the rest of the world. You can also still, as an individual, study what is happening inside these models and build a better technology. So it is true that at some point in my life I was a bit surprised. Someone in my university came to me and said, Bart, I have heard that you are working on a new architecture for large language models. Well, yeah, I was a bit shocked when someone said that to me, but in a sense that is how I like to at least inspire my students, because I think that it is really necessary to happen. So you showed the hype cycle just now, and there was one term that I was really happy by to see that. I don't know whether you saw it. There was, of course, multi-agent systems, which was great already because that is the group that I'm a part of. But also there was first principle artificial intelligence. So let's say that is starting from the mathematics of it all, from the philosophy of it all, and the way you know how I speak, right? So we should really look at what lawyers do, because what lawyers do, discussion, argumentation, using actually knowledge that they have about the rules of law, and also using the examples in the new settings, that process that is normal for lawyers, somehow a native process, that is also how we should redesign architectures such as those for the large language models, for AI in general. So do AI as lawyers actually do their intelligent tasks? Well, work to do. Let's work.
Work to do on that one. Ron, as a last comment, what would you recommend your own data scientists to learn? Mainly Gen AI, or would you actually say, please balance your time to something else as well?
Well, as someone from the corporate, I have to put the the business, the company's benefits as the top priority. And my focus, or data scientists, what they should be focusing is really what are the value-added points. Of course, we will be pioneering and implementing the new technology to the company, but I need to make sure that it can be adapted by the company. So the focus, and if I put suggestions to data scientists, is that they should, when they design a product, they should focus on practical benefits. And maybe at the beginning, you have more of the symbolic than the neural way, but then gradually bring it in as we continue to accumulate. Maybe one simple example is that you could have been building the knowledge graph, but in one day, when you have collected way too much information in the knowledge graph that you actually need the LLM to do a good summarization and put it together for a proper governance perspective, because those leaders who are leading the governance, they would not have time to drill into every detail of the node and the edge. Then at that time, it will be a good use of LLM. That's why I always feel that these technologies are meant to be together, and they should be well connected with each other in a more practical product.
Thank you. Let's open up for questions. And I would like to have the striking questions that are completely against that one first. No, just kidding.
So in that mode, AXA actually issues space insurance, and some of us work on financing and insuring the space economy. So I'm wondering how, given the purity, if you will, or we don't get Matt Damon back from Mars if we don't figure this out, what could we do right at this moment in the development of the space economy with hybrid legal intelligence? You have multinational issues, you have objects governed by different state laws, et cetera. What, in your experience, and you've had to pay out a few claims from time to time, what would you do with that domain of activity and then bring that experience and those lessons learned and that philosophy back terrestrially?
Ron, would you like to take the question, or should I? As you wish.
Well, actually, I think space is very, very interesting field, first of all. And I actually haven't have any experience in space field, but I can refer to the aerospace and some of the knowledge I learned from there. I feel like there are a few key areas. One is that you got from the business side, right? How they design their appetites and whether or not at least inside the company we have the rules that are we allowed to do so from the company perspective. But also we have like by the regulatory side of it, right? We have a lot of like sanctions and those needed to be considered. I think those are all more of even more deterministic. It needs higher accuracy if we put it in that way. So I feel this side will be more symbolic approach. Not sure if I answered the question.
One approach on that one, when you think about space insurance, space tech, is a highly regulated industry that has usually a very, very good specification that is written down and very much articulated knowledge. Instead of now keeping that knowledge solely within the manufacturing company of the satellite, of the spaceship, and so on and so forth, using that kind of information for detecting risks, for detecting ambiguities, is something that should be done more. And this goes in your direction, Damien, what you said. The exchange of knowledge is not happening that much, because even in that space, we are currently building our own knowledge bases, our own large language models, covering things up, but closing things up. And we have to find a way how to leverage the Gen AI effect and the huge benefits we have there, while we are also tackling the interoperability and the reuse of knowledge across organizations, because we see that one as well on our side. We're building now LLMs across the board, or using them on across the board, but sometimes these are scattered out within the organization, and it feels like back in the 80s when people started to invent data warehouses to actually connect all the databases again. And now people think about LLM agents on top of other LLMs. So it gets confused there. So the main thing is reuse the knowledge, the specificities, and especially in these highly regulated industries like marine, space, airplane insurances to the highest extent.
And I would add that on the Sally side, all of the logos on this, one of them includes Thomson Reuters. Speaking of interoperability, Thomson Reuters, Corey is the guy we were working with. Corey's boss said, hey, Corey, we have 30 products. They don't talk to each other. Make them talk to each other. And he said, wow, I have to create a taxonomy. That's really hard since Corey is not a lawyer. But then he looked at Sally and he's like, oh, Sally's got everything I need. So Corey is using Sally to be able to, legal tracker is now Sally tagged, HiQ, and they just keep marching through the products to make them interoperate. That is an internal system that didn't talk to each other. And now all the external law firms, now he could be able to say, if you want to hit those 30 products, send me the Sally tags. And now you can hit all 30 of my products. So that is an external problem that Thomson Reuters is solving. And that is the internal and externals problem that all of those people are solving.
The reason why Damien sits next to me, because then I can stop him if he speaks too long. Next one on the right side.
Hi. I have a theory that I'd like to put to the panel and get your feedback on about why we're not yet with Neuro-Symbolic where we'd like to be.
Yeah.
It starts with the premise that basically anything that you can do with an LLM, someone is doing. So if we're not where we want to be with Neuro-Symbolic, it's probably because we're not where we want to be with Symbolic. If Symbolic was easy, people would be using it with GPT-4 and what have you. So the problem is Symbolic isn't easy. So why is that? I think we may be in kind of a position in law where accounting was in the early 1970s, where it's possible to get computers to do the math, but accountants were not getting computers to do the math because getting computers to do the math required hiring a programmer and getting the programmer to write the code to do the math. And then roughly around 1975, someone invented electronic spreadsheets, which basically jump-started the PC market. And the difference was not the technology, the difference was the interface. And then within 20 years, knowing how to use a spreadsheet became like a basic fundamental capability of being an accountant. And it actually had like a very big positive effect on the demand for accountant services. So my theory is maybe the problem is that like little to no effort has gone into solving the problem of allowing legal professionals to directly interface with symbolic AI technologies.
Okay.
And if that's true, I'd like to know if you agree, and second, if so, what can we do about it?
Okay. Thank you.
So I like the question a lot, and also it resonates with the talk that you gave on Tuesday, right? So that is an attempt, in a sense, to develop tools that perhaps can also be used by lawyers, and that also are very highly symbolic. So there have been many experiments of that kind, right? So actually the field of artificial intelligence and law, or academic field where lawyers and computer scientists, AI people have been discussing already for decades and decades. We saw the Codex Prize winners and Gardner and Thorne McCarthy. They are exponents of that. It has been tried and tried and tried. So maybe the solution is something like we need to actually find a language that is shared between lawyers and computers or of a kind. And then I must admit that I'm also a bit hopeful every now and then. I hope that I don't offend my co-panelists with the large language models, because natural language is becoming a shared language, perhaps. The only thing is that the large language models don't use it in the right way, like what lawyers need. They need all the detail, all the specifics, like in your answer set programming style work, right, where everything can fit together. You also had the best answer I heard on the Tuesday of how you can actually correct a knowledge representation. You look at which examples work for the representation and which examples do not work for the representation. Well, that is also a little bit how lawyers think, right? They look at cases that are normal cases with respect to the state of the art in law, and they look at the cases that go wrong, and then they try to change it in such a way that, let's say, the new perspective on what the law is a better description of how things are. So there is work to do. But, well,
And for those who don't know Jason, he's built Blocks, which is a symbolic AI tool to be able to represent what statutes do. So he knows a lot about this topic. I would add two things: that they're, yes, subject matter experts. Lawyers know a lot. Ask any lawyer; they'll tell you how much they know. And I would say that there's a lot that is represented in the public data, that is in statutes, in the case laws, in the regulations. That is all public data. But there's a lot in the lawyer's brain to say, well, it really depends. Right? It depends on the stuff that's not reflected in the public data that you need to capture in symbolic AI. And every time a lawyer says to me, well, it depends, I say, on what? And then whatever comes out of their mouth, I add that to Sally. And then that's now a thing we can count because it's a thing that matters. So I think you're right. Get the subject matter people in the room and then say, and when they say, it depends, ask them what, and then classify it.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go right side first, I think, just before.
Hello, I came from Brazil. I am a Brazilian lawyer, and my point of view, the most important thing is communication. As you just said, you have several tools that does not communicate, and we are at the best university of the world, and tools does not communicate among them. So I would like to hear from you how AI could increase human relationship. Because in Brazil, people are not talking anymore. Children, I think here also. And we are just dealing with our computers and huge companies like insurance companies. Maybe we have several gains and optimization using computers and AI, but people are not talking anymore. I would like to hear from you this.
I can take the point with a practical example. Imagine you have a car accident. Somebody's injured. And you call your insurance company. The one thing you don't want to do is administrative work, correct? You want to have the other person on the other line being there for you and actually take care of you. AI can help to bridge that gap again by offboarding administrative burdens to the machines. Offboarding the administrative burdens to the machine means that every claims context, your license number, where you are, GPS coordinates, all histories is actually stored automatically. The human is augmented, and the person who is on the phone with you when there's a car accident or somebody breaks into your house is there for you to calm you down and actually be there for you as a person again. So we hope, and this is something what we are driving, and we would like to convince other ones to do the same, that we can, thanks to artificial intelligence, offboard bureaucracy to the machines to be there as a human again, and personalize your experiences as such. So just one comment on my side.
I agree. And when we think about, there's one of the most funny and profound cartoons I've seen in the last year was on the left-hand side, somebody says, look, I took a bullet point, turned it into an email, I pretend I wrote. And then the recipient said, look, I took an email, turned it into a bullet point, I pretend I read. So it's funny, but profound, because if it starts with a bullet point and ends with a bullet point, what's the point of the email in the middle? So one could think about in this neural-symbolic divide, maybe that bullet point on both sides is a symbolic representation, that is a tag. Option two is maybe this is an embedding. You send me your embedding, I'll interpret it with my embedding. That will maybe increase communications in this way. Maybe symbolic, maybe large language model, maybe it'll increase communication.
Yeah, if I can chime in this, I think it's also AI can be very valuable when connecting to the right person. Like considering if a junior employee who actually doesn't know much to do, and if they have question, they don't know who to ask, then with a good ecosystem, it will be helpful to connect folks together, right? They will know who to ask, what are the right steps they need to ask. When they review a contract, who can help them to evaluate if this paragraph of wording is more risky than the original version or templates of it.
But this is the good point. You said about 10 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, that each of you can use AI to develop a contract. But you need to discuss among you to decide which is the best. and this discussion never takes place. This is my kind of critical, but I'm here to learn with you.
Yeah, but maybe the brief answer is I don't know what you like best, to have a discussion with a friend or to have a discussion with ChatGPT.
You know.
You know. Okay, thank you. Question?
My question is really for Damien. One of the two practitioner colleges for real estate lawyers spent many months and hundreds of volunteer hours putting together a model purchase and sale agreement. And everybody said, okay, the goal here is to define what's market. We've got all these great lawyers in a room, they all debated about what's market. And it was released to much fanfare, and so far the early anecdotal evidence is that one of two things is happening. Either someone says, well, maybe that's market for national, but it's not market for me. Or, well, I don't care what's market because these facts are different, and let me tell you why. I'm curious if you think that a shift to a more empirical approach along the knowledge graph lines would change that dynamic, if at all.
I think so. So to use that particular example, I think an acquisition or a real estate industry is a Sally tag. National versus local versus regional is a Sally tag. Force majeure clause is a Sally tag. So you can imagine that every single thing, well, you know, it depends. That's maybe region X and not region Y. You know, that's UK standard, but that's not US standard. Those are both Sally tags too. So this is actually it depends kind of arguments can be debated with data. You know, in God we trust. Everybody else bring data and tag up that data symbolically.
Thank you very much. The one thing that sticks for me, what you mentioned, Bart, that we should have a common language between lawyers and computer scientists. As a computer scientist married to a lawyer, it would help me as well. So with that said, I would like to thank my panelists to drive them forward. We would I would like to have you thinking about large language models in a broader sense. Don't take this topic on generative AI just as for granted. There are more technologies out there that are necessary to solve the problem, and depending on the problem, the approach is different. So with that one, thank you to my panelists, and wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.